Welcome to today's Critical Thought. This is going to be the first of several pieces I was thinking about right at the end of 2017 before this great sickness got to me. And that was doing game design dives on various genres. Kind of what are the nuts and bolts of very unique game genres and what separates that from games that just make use of those systems. And the first one, probably the perfect one to start with, is the RPG genre. RPGs are one of the long-standing genres of the game industry, dating as far back as the late 80s with pen and paper style games like Might and Magic, in the 90s with Baldur's Gate, and then things just exploding even more in the thousands. And what has happened, especially over the last 2 decades, has been a greater adoption of RPG-based systems into other genres, whether it's the progression model in titles like Call of Duty or Battlefield, having RPG levels to your car parts in a lot of racing games or racing games with persistent elements. Of course, the MMO genre, and even in the last few years with role-playing shooters like Borderlands, Division, even something like Prey. And what has happened is that the line between what is and what isn't an RPG has become very blurred. Right up there with everyone declaring so-and-so is the Dark Souls of something else. So, for this supplemental piece, I will be going with a post over on Game Wisdom. We're going to try and drill down what it means to make an RPG versus what is just a game with RPG-based systems. And I guess the first thing we want to do is simply talk about what is the basic DNA of an RPG. And for longtime fans of Game Wisdom and the channel, you should know what's coming. And that is abstracted progression. When we talk about abstraction or abstracted-based progression, we're referring to in-game character or equipment growth that dictates success or failure. Be it buying new gear, leveling up your character, unlocking new abilities on your talent tree, and so on and so forth. The point is, the player, in terms of their skill level, is not the main determining factor over success or failure. When I'm playing a game like Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy or Diablo, yes, there is player skill involved to some extent, but if I'm trying to take on an enemy who's 30 levels above me, it doesn't matter how pro of a gamer I am, I'm going to lose. And if we just keep the RPG definition at that layer, then we can include just about every video game released in the last decade as an RPG. Be it Shadow of War, again, Borderlands, Call of Duty, Rainbow Six Siege, and you name it. And again, the reason why a lot of games have been borrowing heavily from the RPG genre is that the progression model, or that power curve, is very effective at keeping people playing. It's basically infinitely scalable. As long as you can just keep raising number values on gear, on your character's level, or even having prestige-based systems, you can keep playing these games indefinitely. And it's a far cry from the old days of action titles where you hit the end, and that's it. And again, abstracted-based progression is also heavily seen in mobile and free-to-play games for that very same reason. If you're able to abstract it, you can monetize it. Now, with that said though, the other 2 points I want to branch out in this video is when we start to narrow the field in terms of what is and isn't an RPG. And the second part is customization and personalization. If you missed our previous talk, personalization refers to the aesthetic qualities of a character. Height, weight, gender, skin color, whether they have like glowing fireflies around their head, and so on and so forth. For some people like me, we spend like 5 to 10 seconds in the character editor. Some people spend 5 to 10 hours perfectly sculpting their character down to every single detail to make the character look just like themselves. And personalization, again, is a very simple yet very effective quality of life system that can add to these games, especially those built on these social aspects. Customization, though, is a different story. This is referring to the in-game options that you can pick for your character. For old school RPG fans, it's the ever popular holy trinity of warrior, cleric, and mage. It is being able to choose what class your character is, what runes you choose in Diablo 3, and pick an RPG, and there's an example of this. But customization is a very integral part of RPGs, and the later version of it is usually seen in games built on RPG-based systems. And this is when we can start to exclude some of these games. And the first very simple exclusion is having a standard or a set skill tree. You see this in many action and first-person shooters that try to put RPG-based systems, where every player will have the same progression skill tree from beginning to end. Level 1 plus running speed. Level 5, your weapon does a little more damage. Level 10, reload speed. And again, we repeat it. You can see this in games such as Borderlands, The Division, and Payday 2. That while there is some malleability, or there's some ability to be customized about it, you're still dealing with set options. And when you only have 3 or 4, or sometimes even less, it puts a limit on just how unique you can be. And the easiest way to tell if a game is not an RPG is whether or not the choices, or the amount of choices you have, can lead to varying characters and varying builds. If everyone just builds their soldier, their technomancer, their psycho in Borderlands, and you name it, the exact same way or using the exact same skills, then it's not really an RPG at that point. And something like The Division is a really good example. Again, The Division has 3 skill trees, or I should say quote-unquote skill trees you can make use of, but you're only limited to so many choices. And this is kind of where action designers try to have their cake and eat it too. Wow, my mouth is still slurring there. But the point is, yes, you have all these choices you can pick from, but you can only have 3 or 4 active at any time, sometimes even less. And because of that, it makes it very easy for copycat skills or copycat builds to come about. In a true RPG, one built on a lot of customization, you are given almost carte blanche in terms of how you build and define your character. Some of my favorites would be like the Etrian Odyssey series, where I can literally build this party however I see fit, and I'm very sure that most people will do something differently. Or if you're playing an MMO that has if you're playing something like Warframe, with all the weapons and skill cards and armor and so on, that it's very rare to find 2 people having the exact same build or the exact same play style. Now, if you're going to do things with set choices or set perks, you need to make those be very standout, very prevalent in terms of what they do. Something like the rune system in Diablo 3, or the perks in what I just played with Prey. In Prey, we all have access to the same 6 skill trees in that game, but you cannot get everything. And that's another major point that I didn't bring up in the written piece I want to say here. It is certainly not an RPG if you can literally get every option on that skill tree. Basically, at that point, you're just saying that there is no choice. If I want to be a warrior, mage, ranger, cleric, archer, and just get everything by the end of the game, it's very hard to say that you're really giving the player options at that point. Now, with that said, the third distinction of what is and what isn't an RPG, if we go down a little bit further, has to do with more about the choices presented to the player. By now, you should have probably realized that the key point about what is an RPG has to do with the choices involved in playing it. This is why action-based games can't really be considered RPGs, because we are going through a linear set of events with a linear set of upgrades and persistent elements. Again, Metroid, no matter how many upgrades you give Samus, is not an RPG, no matter what happens there. But when we talk about choices in video games, and this could easily be its own video, which I'm actually thinking about doing in the near future, choices can be everything from the story perspective to the gameplay. Now, when it comes more about gameplay, again, it's not just about building your character out, but also being able to choose what goes on in that world. many popular RPGs over the last decade, stuff like Mass Effect and The Witcher especially, or even the Skyrim series, gives you complete freedom in terms of how you approach various quests and deciding how that plays out going forward. Again, with The Witcher, I only played the first one all the way through, but even back then, that game had a number of choices that those elements would reverberate out going forward. The same can be said from what I've heard of Mass Effect, especially with how they carry over between all three games in the original trilogy. But the point, once again, is how I play the game is going to be different from how you play the game, and how your friends play the game, and so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to a narrative point of view, this is when things get very tricky, because as we've seen, the great distinction between CRPG and JRPG design is that many JRPGs tend to focus more on elaborate and deep systems, but they really lack player choice in terms of the story. You may be able to choose a few set endings here and there, but my path's going to be reasonably the same as yours. While CRPG games have really, or I'm sorry, just CRPGs, have really stepped up in recent years with giving players both. Again, with The Witcher 3 being one of the most popular examples of saying, you can build Geralt however you see fit, and you can also play the story however you see fit. And one of these days, I really need to get around to playing the Divinity games. Divinity, I think, Original Sin 1 and 2 that came out over the last few years. But again, when it comes to CRPG design, developers, again, since the old days, have been doing a lot to giving the player a massive story to explore. Baldur's Gate, Fallout, Pillars of Eternity, and again, name a Black Isle or BioWare game of the 90s, and there's probably going to be a very deep and multi-choice story to go with it. And again, when you're able to give the player this amount of storytelling and this amount of customization, this is where we can really separate RPGs from games with RPG-based systems. Now, that said, though, to wrap things up for today, just because we're making this distinction does not make those games bad. Again, Call of Duty's progression model, Battlefield, and other titles is very effective at keeping people playing, and creates a very popular feedback loop to scale up with the player as they continue to grow. Because again, if you can start to give player an actual in-game representation of their growth, again, better guns, higher numbers, flashier armor, you name it, it motivates them to keep playing to see what's next. The problem, though, and what hurts a lot of these games that are just built on RPG systems, is that they always reach a point where it just stops. You hit max level. You've gotten all legendary weapons. There's no new challenges left, and the developers are just trying to throw more numbers at you, and it doesn't work. Again, if I'm already at peak level and I'm killing enemies doing 18,000 damage, a minute, having me repeat the same thing but doing 20,000 points of damage a minute isn't really changing it. This is what I ran into with titles like The Division and even Borderlands. That it was great during the leveling curve, but at the end, I just stopped caring about my character, because what else can you throw at me other than just bumping every enemy's level up by 50, 60 points? And even RPGs like Diablo suffer that problem as well. This is why the narrative side is such an effective way to keep things going. Because yes, I've reached the end of the story with this build, but let me play again doing this, and then this, and so on. And I'm kind of curious, for those of you who've played the Mass Effect trilogy, did you ever go back and replay it with a completely different style? Or I know some people, including myself, tend to play these games one and done. I remember, I forget who said this about like The Walking Dead, but when they originally played through that, they didn't want to replay it because they felt that their first playthrough was their story. And that is certainly a fair way of playing it. But to wrap things up for today, can you think of games that have, or can you think of other distinctions between RPGs and games with RPG-based systems? And are there examples from both sides that the RPG gameplay turned you off? because that's always very challenging to do right. And hell, we could probably spend a few videos just discussing what it means to make interesting or engrossing RPG level design or game design. But with that said, thanks for watching today's Critical Thought. If you'd like to suggest a topic for the future, please let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, check back for daily discussions on design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. If you'd like to suggest games for me to cover or topics to talk about, let me know in the comments below. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on design, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the Game Wisdom Patreon, you can find us on there on patreon.com/GWBycer. $1 will get you into our private Discord channel where we talk game topics and more. $5 will get you voting privileges for any major event, including the Saturday Night Grab Bag, Patreon-funded goals, and more. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoy more videos here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel.